Cup replays, do we need them? The players will tell us, many of them will tell us, of course, not least those into player welfare. Too many games. We don't need cup replays. Various managers have various takes on this. I want yours in a second. I mean, there's one, Wolves, for example. What was Nuno's take on it?
Everybody's aware that it's a big congestion of games. The fixtures are every day, so it's something that they have to look at it. That, if you ask me personally, I think that should be finished on the day. Extra time, penalties, whatever, there are things that and allow the players to have a little bit more of time to recover. The Premier League is suffering on that, and you know the issues that happen in terms of injuries, all these things. One of the things is the amount of fixtures that we are exposed to.
That was Nuno. Of course, I'm behind the times. Now, these days of Forest, not Wolves, but they've drawn, so they've got to go again. And then you go to Luton, where I was yesterday, and you hear the view of Rob Edwards, whose club drew 0-0 with Bolton and have to do it again.
Yeah, we could do without it. But you know what? It's just the reality, and that's it now. So we've got to try and get our heads around it. Our schedule changes. Now we play Burnley away in a few days' time on Friday instead of Monday. Because of the replay, let's just go and deal with it. And, you know, our mindset will be the same. We want to go and win the game.
I like that, Rob. Let's just get on with it. But what about Brentford? They drew with Wolves. This was Thomas Frank.
This is the worst outcome. Honestly, it is in every aspect. I said it yesterday. I simply don't understand why we have a replay. Don't understand it. I know Wolves get the home advantage, but I'm pretty sure if I'm not speaking with him in here in front of the media, I'm pretty sure he will say the same. That's why play a game there. I simply don't understand why there's no one in the football world that changed this. But they need to take some more clever decisions.
So some want a replay, some don't. Some can see them far enough. This was Neil Critchley of Blackpool.
It's so important, I just think, for, I don't know, football in general, isn't it? I think the level now between the Premier League and the rest is getting wider, in my opinion. I think it's getting harder to cause and cup upset. Look at the results yesterday and today. It's, you know, that's Premier League against Championship. So I think it's such an achievement to cause an upset. So if you get a second chance to do it, then we'd rip your hand off for that. I can assure you we're delighted we've got a replay, and yeah, it's a busy schedule, but so what? Get on with it. I think this is something like our 36th game this season, you know? Well, the Premier League teams haven't played that. They get international breaks. They get time off. We don't. Get on with it. You know, look at the resources they've got. Look at the finance, you know, the facilities, the staffing. We don't have that. So, you know, tough. Just get on with it. It's football. Let's play.
I like Critchley there. Do you not, Graham?
Get
on with it.
Yeah, but I think we will see, possibly next year, replays being done away with. If the big guys want it, they'll make it happen. And I think it's a mixture of the importance of the Premier League now, survival. Although Rob Edwards is the obvious one to come out and say that they think it's a good thing you play more games and replays. When they've got a real chance of survival, that might come back to bite them. But I think the vast majority, if not certainly all the big clubs, do not want to be playing replays. As I was going to say, the two things are the importance of the Premier League, retaining your status in the Premier League, and outside the very top teams, who their argument would be they play enough games in Europe and everything else, and the diminishing interest in the FA Cup. I think it's two arguments there.
I mean, Simon, is this not the element of the Cup that needs protecting?
Depends what you value it as. I do, and as I said to you last week, talking about it in the article that I wrote about the FA Cup and the value of it. Look, I mean, I'm not surprised Rob Edwards talks about it not being a big deal. He comes from a league where they play 46 games. He's just gone up to the Premier League, they play 38. He's probably going to play less games this season.
Doing it strange come from him, and given that they have a chance of retaining their status as a Premier League team.
And then you've got Sean Dyche talking about, I'm not really comfortable with the winter break. Whatever you do, there seems to be a necessity for people to complain about it. The FA Cup is a valued tournament. There is an agenda and an initiative to remove the fourth cup, the League Cup. It's been done in lots of leagues around Europe. UEFA have had their two pennies in about whether fourth tournaments should be relevant to a season in terms of a second cup in this football. The third round is a big part of English football. If the big sides are worried about replays, well, why don't you win the bleeding game?
Well, that's it. I'm looking at one message, Graham. If you don't want a replay, deal with it in the first game.
No, I think replays will very soon be a thing of the past.
Well, Graham may well be right, because what he's suggesting is that the big clubs get their way. Well, there's
Well,
a balance.
Don't they always?
Well, not always, but there is a distinct possibility that they may well, in this instance, given the fact that the Premier League rights, the FA Cup rights have been given to the Premier League to sell. I don't think they should be given their way in this. I think the FA Cup is a very valuable tournament and it should be maintained with a level of decorum and tradition. Because if you take away everything, we've allowed it. It's up to the FA. I think the FA are a joke. I think given I think the FA are a joke, it's probably likely to happen that whatever the big clubs want, whoever those perceived big clubs are, may well be what they get. And I'm not necessarily adverse to the idea of games being concluded on the first in terms of on the day. What I would be looking towards in that respect is a trade-off. Then, if you want to do that, I tell you what, the idea that I spoke about last week about the seeding, so that the Premier League clubs cannot be drawn against one another, they're drawn against lesser clubs, and ultimately the lesser clubs get an opportunity to play the bigger clubs in a game that gets concluded on the day. That would be maybe a trade-off that ultimately gets people into a situation where they're more comfortable, because we're seeing at this moment in time the third round. For me, I don't know what you thought of it, Graeme. As an owner, the third round draw was an interesting part of the football calendar. It was the
exciting.
Day
yeah, but the interest, you have to admit, the interest in the FA Cup has diminished. It has been watered down.
Only because of the size and scale of the Premier League.
Yeah, the Premier League has done that.
See, there's not a lot of sympathy out there. Phil in Newcastle, if Thomas Frank thinks a draw is the worst possible outcome, then it's down to them. They shouldn't come out of it on level terms after the first game. They've got themselves to blame. I mean, for talking's sake, Simon, I'm at Luton Bolton yesterday. The Bolton goalkeeper, Nathan Baxter, played out his skin. So say yesterday goes to penalties and Bolton lose, having brought 2,500 down to Kenilworth Road, and Baxter couldn't keep out the penalties. That would, in my view, that would be unfair on Baxter, on Bolton and the fans who travel.
But I think we have to be pragmatic and realistic in our outlook. We have allowed, for one way or another, the FA have allowed the Premier League, the league that they licensed in 1991, to take control of English football, and now the tail wags the dog. And they're not even prepared to regulate the game. They need an independent regulator to do that. So here we are in a situation where we're trying to maintain, which I believe is a fundamental, all of these fundamental things that made the Premier League get forgotten. The Premier League wouldn't exist if there wasn't a pyramid. The FA, the perception of English football wouldn't be as high around the world if it didn't have these brand values like the FA Cup. But they get diminished more and more by the nature of the beast, which is the Premier League and the European Champions League and the European football.
Jurgen Klopp saying football people should make the decisions. Thomas Frank is saying the wrong people are making the wrong decisions. There's a common theme here. You should make the decision.
But again,
in other words, should the clubs predetermine the cup replay dilemma?
Depends what you think football. Some of the most disingenuous people that I've met in my life are so-called football people. But what I get to hear is what people don't want to do. What I don't get to hear is what the actual solutions to it are, and how they would have it run, and how international breaks would be coincided with domestic football, and how the fact that successful football clubs play more games. If you want to be successful, then ultimately you're going to play more games. And all of these things, we listened to Martin Keown and his particular brand of tripe about how we're going to find a solution to problems by saying it's not fair, we don't like it. Let's get the players at the table so they can tell us, well, we know what they can tell us, what they don't want to do. We know that. So how are you going to fix it? You want to play in the Champions League, you want to play international football, you want to be at the biggest clubs. All of those come with 50, 60, 70 games attached to them.
Is it crazy?
So how are you going to fit it in?
Is it crazy to think, Simon, tie by tie, they ask the clubs before a ball is kicked?
Oh, no.
Do you want this ended on the day? Do you want to go
No,
down?
they can't do that.
Can go down
Why?
that road.
Because it'd be chaos.
Yeah, you'd be
You have
one
to have
for it, one
structure.
against it. You know,
No, you can't
So
do that.
replays are here to stay, although you think, Graeme, they're not.
I think replays will be a thing of the past very soon. I would imagine it'll go to extra time and ultimately penalties to decide.
I mean, I would have
And a
thought
one-off
Bolton
game.
fans listening this morning would be delighted that their club got a replay and that you'll take Luton to your place. And so you should be, because you played well and you kept him out. But what's your take on replays? Should they soon be a thing of the past, as Graeme is suggesting, or is it part and parcel of the FA Cup tradition?
But what Graeme, and to some extent I, are saying is the reality of a situation. We all know what the lesser clubs want to achieve from the FA Cup.
Yeah.
And we all concur with it. But in the real world, where commerciality now trumps sentimentality, it's likely to achieve an outcome where the FA Cup gets third round replays removed. But if it's a trade-off, if you had people that were effective, that were able to say, okay, I tell you what, Premier League, and all your necessity to have everything you want at the front of the queue, then what we'll do is, like myself and Graeme said, is we'll take the Premier League clubs out of the opportunity to play one another. They'll only get to play lesser opposition, and they have to play away.
Yeah.
So that gives people a chance. But of course, the flip side of that is if you go to play Sutton at Sutton, if Liverpool went to play Sutton at Sutton, there were 6,000 fans, they'd get 150 grand between the two clubs, split 75 grand each. If they go to Anfield, they get 50, 60,000 fans, they get an opportunity to split 45% each of 900 grand.
And it's the revenue they want.
It's the revenue
of
that they
course.
want.
There's Adam, great show, guys. Love Graeme Souness on the FA Cup replays. If you don't like replays, then play better and win the game first time around. That seems to be the theme that's coming through, Graeme. Get the job done, get it out the road, and then there are no complaints. David's a big Tottenham fan. David, good morning to you. Where do you stand on replays, mate?
Morning. Yeah, for me, I think from a selfish point of view, Tottenham are, in a few seasons' time deep into a European campaign, and we're challenging for the title. I think that if we had to have a replay, I'd be a bit like, another game. But I think for me, it is very much about the tradition of the FA Cup, and this is what it's all about. It's given teams like, someone like a Maidstone, for example, who had a fantastic result at the weekend. It's about giving these lower teams that opportunity, for a bit of extra income. And for me, the opportunity of a giant killing. And for me, this is what the tradition of the FA Cup is all about. Growing up, that's always what it's been about. So that's kind of my view.
I mean, David, it's a good point. It's hard to argue against that, Graeme.
No, it's very hard to argue against it. He sounds like a young man, and he's, but it's an old man's sentiments. The history of the FA Cup, the greatest knockout cup competition in the world, the oldest one in the world. It should be an ideal world, still up there. It's
lauded and applauded.
End of the season game sort of brings a curtain down the end of the season. But now it's all just been watered down, and it's all to do with the strength and the power and the attraction of the Premier League.
I mean, you played with the big boys. When you were at Liverpool, were you ever taken to a replay in the FA Cup and you're glad you were because it gave you a second bite at the cherry?
Well, you're glad you're going because you're still in it. Yeah. Listen, I think the third round, you alluded to it, the third round of the FA Cup was a very special day. You as well, a very special day. But I think some of that has gone out of it for two reasons. There's always major surprises, always. And they've become fewer and fewer for, in my opinion, two very obvious reasons. I think the state of the pitches today and the refereeing, which is far stricter than it used to be. To give you an example, a big team in my day going to play a small team, the small team would train on their pitch every day in the build-up to the game on the Saturday. The ideal scenario for that small team was they got a frost on the Friday night, so you turn up on the Saturday, the big team, it's full of ruts.
Rutted, yeah.
Full of ruts, and the referee's saying, yeah, you can play on this.
You can play it, yeah.
And that was the greatest level of all. So that no longer exists. All the pitches are perfect, which suits a better football team.
Sure. I'm listening to Simon, says Ian, who's a Port Vale fan, he says, I'd prefer to be away and visit a Premier League ground. I can imagine that, because then it's a big day out for you, and if somehow you get there, well, that's a double bonus. You've got some money in the bank and you've also progressed. Ian's a Wolves fan. Ian, good morning. What's your stance on it, mate?
Yeah, hi there. Great show, lads.
Right, thank you.
I think is to make the third round and maybe the fourth round draw more appealing again, is once the draw's been made, is give the option to any club lower than the Championship the option to play the game home or away. And that game has got to be finished on that day. But at least they get the option to go, you know what, we'll go and make the money at the Premier League club, or we'll keep them at our place.
That's a good point, Ian. That's what you were suggesting, Sam, in the example you made.
To some extent, it's a derivative of what I was saying. I think you have to have structure. I don't think you can have people picking and choosing whether they play home or away. But I do think if you create structure and governance, and that basically suggests Premier League clubs are drawn from a bowl that doesn't play one another and gives the lesser clubs an opportunity. And if you made it on the basis of what the decision is it better for the smaller clubs to play away against the bigger clubs, or would they prefer to play at home? And then
Simon, they go away. They play where the most money was. They would go and play in a big stadium.
Well, there you are then.
And get the 45.
There's not but there's an irony about it, isn't there? Because isn't it falling into the same trap of what the Premier League has talked about, which is all about money. It's not about the actual value of the game. Once upon a time, when people were scoring goals, when Ronnie Radford was scoring goals for Hereford and knocking Newcastle out of the FA Cup and XYZ, it wasn't about how much money they could get. It was about the value of the cup. Now we're actually talking in terms of, well, it's not about the value of the cup. It's about how much money people can get from playing in the cup.
But you can get that argument as well.
I get it all because it's the real world, and this is the world that we're now living in. And the balance is how you combine pragmatism with sentimentality to ensure that the value of something that's enshrined in the game, which has produced the Premier League, because the Premier League didn't just come out of nowhere. It came out of all of the legacies of the Football League and the FA Cup and everything about English football.
Yeah.
What comes out on top every time?
Premier League.
No, in terms, forget outside of the UK as well. What comes out on top every time? Whether it's UEFA making a decision, FIFA making a decision, it comes. How can we monetize this? How can we make most money out of it?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, the FA Cup will have to take a back seat on this and just accept what's coming their way.
Kevin, North Wales isn't having it. He said the magic of the Cup is a non-league side or lower opponent beating a big team and taking the replays out. You lose all that magic, says Kev. I mean,
he's right. He's right. Of course, he's right. But sentiment takes a back seat to
commercial
finances
reality
of the game.
Yeah.
Dom's a big Liverpool fan. Dom, you know who we've got in studio, Liverpool legend Graeme Souness. You're going to disagree with Graeme, I think, Dom, aren't you?
Yeah, I am going to disagree with Graeme on it. But it's not. I don't really want to be honest. I'm glad I'm not there in the studio. But no, to be honest with you, I think being involved in like non-league sides, I remember the secretaries used to have to pay a fee to enter the FA Cup every season. For me, I think you know the rules. It's been a domestic cup that has been around for years and years and years. We don't have any divine right to start saying that we're going to change this now. I think if you remember rightly, when Manchester United won the treble, the following year they went to play the World Club Championships in Brazil, and they actually withdrew from the FA Cup competition. So, I mean, the rules are there in black and white. I think if you don't like it, then withdraw. You know what I mean? There's no...
You're so right, but, you know, again, I'd ask you to look at it the cold light of day and how, you know, finance is just... That's what makes the decision at the end of the day. The sentiment, you're 100% correct in everything you've said. You know, the greatest cup competition in the world, knockout competition. But I'm afraid, as every decision on whether it's sentiment or finance wins the day, and that's the world we live in.
Finance wins the day. Should it though, Dom? That's your point.
Well, I think especially for the bigger clubs, then definitely. But for the local sort of non-league sides, it's a massive money spinner. The only thing I'll say on it is I don't think we'll need a replay this year, Graeme. We're going all the way. So.
I think we're looking red hot at the moment.
There you go.
Red hot.
Dom, you've succeeded in having a Liverpool loving at the end. Okay, replays. You think replays, a line might be put through replays as early as next season?
I think so. I think there'll be a clamour. I mean, for the big clubs, especially the big guys who are Champions League and the second tier European competition, they don't want any more games.
All I can say is from
But see, we're talking about the FA Cup.
Go on.
Can I just throw this in? How good is the Premier League this year? Would we really want to take away anything that might endanger the spectacle that's the Premier League every weekend?
I know what you're saying, Graeme, but I would say this. I watched a 0-0 draw at Luton against Bolton yesterday.
I saw a great game.
You saw a great game in the weekend. Would I want to see Bolton
Rangers
play Luton again? Yeah, because they went at it start to finish, and there were some great individual performances. Can there not be room for both? Can there not be room?
Well, if you listen to the managers this weekend, no.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.